everybody? Welcome to another episode of On the Grind with Justin Brown. It's your boy, Young Justin, Young Old Justin. I don't know if you can be 28 and still call yourself young, but I'm doing it. At least till 30. Young Justin in the house. Man, it's Saturday, May 5th. It's a good day. Went to a little bit about my day, I went over to Third Eye Comics over in Annapolis. Nice little drive over there from DC because today was free comic book day. And it was good to get over there, I've never been to that particular comic book store. Just some background. I have a few comics. I've been gifted some. I purchased some of my own for different reasons. I'm kind of into comic books, but not like a steady reader. I'm really more so into it for the aesthetic. If something looks pretty, I like it. That's why I like looking at comic book covers, a nice poster. That's why I'm collecting posters. And, if butts were collectible, I collect butts, but, gotta stick with Instagram, I guess. Anyway, butts and aesthetic aside, it was a nice little trip over there. Randomly ran into some family over there checking out comic books, so that was pretty cool. Picked up a copy of Black Panther, because, ride with him until find another black comic book to ride with. But actually, no, I have a couple other ones that I messed with. But went over there, grabbed Black Panther, and a couple of the Hulk stories. Planet Hulk, I heard, was pretty good. And then World War Hulk was also pretty good, so I copped those. And that's just for any blurs out there or nerds in general into that sort of thing, man. Those are some nice pickups. But yeah, man, last couple of weeks been on that comedy grind and stuff. Hit a few new mics. I was glad this week I got back to my old roots or old ethic of getting out on Monday through Friday. Was able to do that this week, thankfully. So shout out to everybody that allowed me to do so. That was good. That was real good, man. It's just being able to get out there steadily and work. Not having to feel like you have to stay at home, watch these suck-ass Wizards blow their playoff chances every game. I guess it helps that the Wizards aren't playing. Less of an excuse to want to stay in to watch them or catch them somewhere. But even when I was out, they stunk. So thank you, Wizards, for, ending your playoff chances early so I can go have a better work ethic about my comedy. That being said, what's going on? What's going on with me outside of that? Yeah, it's been chill. Chill enough, It's a struggle. I think still just being a dude, for the pure fact that being able to speak your mind about certain things, and also sometimes being black. If you ever feel marginalized or like your voice has been devalued or isolated and things like that, you're gonna feel like that even when you're comfortable speaking your mind. Like at work, they were talking about this dude. There's this councilman, DC, Terrance Gawith, who said the other week that, about a month ago actually, I don't have the whole context, but what he said was the Jews control the weather, or the Rothschilds control the weather, which is some ancient, well, not ancient, but they've been rich for about a couple centuries now. The money is based strongly in Europe, loosely in several different countries over there, like Germany, France, England, UK, and all that stuff. But he said they control the weather, and boy, oh boy, did the whites and the liberals in D.C. not like it. Now, for the background, Terrance Gawith is a black man who is a D.C. councilman currently. He grew up in Southeast Washington, D.C., struggle coming up. He started, I think, about middle school, high school, where he had a mentor. He, started to find himself a little bit, started giving back to the community and supporting his fellow students. He's an active member. He was an active member and still is. One of the Boys and Girls Club. He's always wanted to speak out for the Southeast Ward 8, Ward 7 community. And I think that's very powerful. Apparently he came up under Marion Barry in his latter years. The less fascinating of them. This is after the incident, because beforehand, if you don't know about Marion Barry, very strong, active community, grassroots kind of councilman, I think, and then mayor. Was always riding with his city, riding with his people, ride or die. He was the face of Chocolate City for some time. Anyway, he came up under Marion Barry after a whole you know, the bitch lied version of Marion Barry, which was, again, not his most glamorous years, which is kind of cool. I mean, at least he got to come up under him. You know what I mean? It's like if I, doing comedy now, was asked to go on tour with Bill Cosby. Granted, it's not it's not old school Bill Cosby, the one that can, back in the day had audiences sitting and laughing as he sat and told his stories on stage, walked around on stage, and did all those things, man. Like back then, touring with Bill Cosby would mean many doors were open, and now I guess touring with Bill Cosby would mean that many doors were open in a jail, because that's probably where he's going. I would talk about the case a bit more, but it is what it is, man. If he did it, especially that many times, you gotta pay for it somehow. It's like how they keep catching these Holocaust people, the Nazis, and they're still paying it for later years. You know what I mean? So they get it stuck to him. I guess Bill has to get it stuck to him. Hopefully Harvey Weinstein, who was caught, recently, gets something stuck to him. Like, everybody who does wrong shit should have stuff stuck to them, not just black people. But it's a lot to digest, too. Anyway, back to Terrance White. He came up under the Bill Cosby of D.C. mayors in Marion Barry. And not actually, depending on where you are with Bill Cosby, whatever. That's a good enough analogy, fuck it, to get my point across. Anyway, he came up under him, so he didn't get he got Marion Barry, but not the same Marion Barry that I think was the most influential and impactful. Anyway, he's been active in this grassroots advocacy scene of DC, especially for, again, Wards 7 and 8, the most economically stricken parts of DC. You're talking about food deserts over there. You're talking about just not a lot of money flowing over there, unless it's new money for new people. So let's keep that in mind. Anyway, what he said about the Rothschilds, or lack of better terms, Jews controlling the weather, turned a lot of people off to him. You know what I mean? A lot of the stories I saw, too, were just slanted against him and only talked about what he said and not who he was as a person, which I have a little bit of a problem with, especially, we're talking about the news not being slanted. Then again, if you watched anything on the news long enough, you'll realize, they're in it for themselves and the money, so fuck them. Anyway, he said that, and like a couple weeks later, this is a couple weeks ago as well, they had him go to the Holocaust Museum with like whoever the Jews call when, stuff's going down, like they got them on them. I think it's the National Jewish League or something, like a superhero for Jews, the power to, control banks and the weather, I guess. Anyway, they went to the Holocaust Museum with some of their strongest members, and they were trying to talk some, sense into him to try to make him empathize, but it didn't go over well. He left like halfway through saying he had a meeting, and his staff didn't know what was going on, and when the Jewish representatives came outside to greet him, he was like still skeptical about things. So, I mean, it is what it is. He said something in a position where he's going to catch flack for it. The real question is, was he wrong? Let's find out more tomorrow or something. Anyway, man, yeah, I just don't like, anytime they paint a black man into, one thing for me specifically, anytime they paint a black person in a negative light, I try to get full context of not only the situation, but also that person, especially if we don't get a fair shake. Since we don't get a fair shake, as much as any other race in this country does, I think it's very important for me to make sure I know who the hell people are talking about. And not just with black men or black people, but definitely with black people do I go out of my way to do that, man. It'd be nice, if they painted a whole picture of the dude and not just what he said. Who knows? He could have been drunk and said it. Not a good look, but still, you know what I mean? It's just, it's probably going to cost him his seat. But the funniest part was there's another councilman in D.C., Spanish dude, who just had to resign because he had a rally to support Terrance White. And he had a Muslim speaker there in this public little rally for Terrance. And I guess he didn't do his research on his guest speaker because some Jewish reporter or white reporter or just someone out there in the sea of people that this man was talking to. And when I say sea, I mean like the letter C. It's about a line of people in the shape of a C. It wasn't like, the March on Washington or something. Anyway, he said something about, he went in on Jews for like a good minute to the point where the Spanish dude was like, hey man, you stop, try to stay positive, you're making me look bad. And it got so bad that, they had to write up a negative report on it, or they chose to write negative reports about what happened and all the things that were said. And the Spanish councilman who said he had to resign, it was because he was getting a lot of like death threats against his family and stuff, which is, crazy. That's worse than what Terrance White said. If you're threatening someone's life versus like a cloudy day, you need to go look at yourself, you dick. Leave these people alone. They're trying to better serve the city. And, without a lot of strong leadership and honest leadership to whose footsteps they can follow, they need margin for error. And with how DC is changing, I don't think they're going to get that fair shake. So, Spanish councilman, I forget your name. Sorry, dude. I should have looked it up. But you had that weird mustache. So, you know who you are. Mustache. Spanish guy with a weird mustache. And Treyon, man. I hope y'all keep your heads up. Fix whatever's going wrong. Fix your shit. I want to see y'all do well in the future. That being said, man, that's just something I want to talk about real quick. Today, we're going to go ahead and get into the show. My guest today, good friend of mine, stand-up comedian Terrance Gawith. Dumbass last name, but white people have those all the time. Gawith. But hailing from Kansas City. Good friend of mine. I've known him for a few years in comedy. We sat down, talked about comedy and what it means to, be unfiltered. And we really tapped into like freedom of speech and how, society is scared to hold up a mirror to itself, especially American society. Especially if they can just go to brunch and be happy. We feel like a lot of people aren't going to do that. So that's basically what most of this episode's about. I hope you really listen. We also touch on the White House Correspondents' Dinner with Michelle Wolf. Props to her for doing her thing up there. Kind of want to bash her throat in. The voice was a bit much. People were taken aback by the jokes. I was taken aback by her voice. It's like, Jesus Christ. If that's what Jews sound like, maybe they do control the weather. Anyway, let me stop messing around. Let's go ahead and get to this episode. Thank you guys for listening. Let's do it. Alright everybody, welcome back to On the Ground with Justin Brown. This is your host, Justin Brown. And today we have a good friend of mine. Go ahead and introduce yourself, player.
I am Terrance Gawith, a nobody comedian. Hello everybody. Thanks for having me, JB.
No problem. I wouldn't call yourself a nobody. There's plenty of people in Waldorf and Fort Washington that know you, I'm pretty sure. But thanks for coming on, man. Happy to have you and shit.
Thanks for having me.
So Terrance, or as I like to call him, White T, tell him about yourself. What are you about these days?
Oh man, just doing the grind, man. Doing. Still got the day job, obviously, because I ain't out there eating on the mic like some people are. So it's pretty much work, gym, comedy, man. That's the daily grind.
True. Okay. How long have you been doing comedy?
December will be 5 years, man. Five years.
Okay. And stand up only, or what else do you do in comedy?
When I first started, I started to try to do like the little YouTube videos, stuff like that. Like like everybody else was doing, because it was fun. Vine was out around that time too, and that was off and popping. Instagram, it wasn't even owned by Facebook at that point, so I was doing like little, just stupid stuff. I still do some occasionally. I don't really do the YouTube anymore because that's just like work, man. I don't know if you ever tried it, but
I tried like once or twice, but yeah, that's just not for me, man. Even just like cutting little promos for this,
right?
It's a minute long for an Instagram video,
right?
But I do like 2 or 3 takes, and that's like,
dude,
I do that and I'm done. That's why I only do this podcast.
Imagine like daily content or weekly content even, and then all the cameras and all that. Dude, yeah. I'm not camera savvy. Computer editing savvy.
Tech savvy and all that stuff.
I can do it, but like I don't know how to edit videos and all that. Then you got to go out in there and buy all the software. I was like, fuck this, man. It's not for me.
True. Okay. So let's get into what it is for you. How what is the thing that got you into comedy? Why are you a stand-up?
Oh, man. It was something I always knew I wanted to do, man. I grew up, I feel like, in the golden age of comedy, man. I would sneak watches of Def Comedy Jam back in the day. I would watch with my dad when I was visiting him because my parents are divorced. When we were together and I was on his every other weekend, we'd watch some Def Comedy Jam, man. And I just remember...
You and your dad?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So, and I just remember, man, like I thought it was the coolest thing to see somebody jump behind the mic, say things, and have just a crowd full of strangers just in an uproar over. And I mean, you could see them like they're waiting on them to say whatever it is they got to say. And then you couple that with like all the 80s comedies and all that I grew up watching, like, Blazing Saddles and, Planes, Trains, Automobiles and all that stuff, So that was when I knew I wanted to make people laugh.
That's interesting, too, because I know you guys can't see him, but Terrance is white.
Yeah.
He's got a lot of jokes about being a white dude named Terrance, and it's one of the weirder things you'll see, I guess, but it's interesting because it sounds like all your influence, for the most part, are black comedy, or at least black comedian
It really was, man. I'll never forget it, man. Like, I think we always talk, that's that running stigma, comics are broken people, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the funniest things that I'll always remember was at a very young age, I was listening to rap and I was listening to rock. And I went to school one day and I started quoting some Poison, the rock band, the 80s Hairspray, whatever the hell it's called. I started quoting that, and this girl, black girl named Ramona, she heard me, and this was young.
This is Kansas City, right?
This is Kansas, yeah. So middle of nowhere, white trash everywhere, but I grew up with all black woman named Ramona. All my friends were black, like, because we grew on the poor side of that dirt, dirt town and all that. But I went in there, I quoted some, I think it was Nothing But a Good Time, if I remember correctly. But that shit, like, touched my soul. And she's like, oh, hell no, what is that? And then, like, her and all her friends started laughing at me at the Rock, and I was like, I'm never doing this again. It's rap all the way. I swear to God.
You had a black woman scare you out of doing something you want to do.
I'm telling you, man. It wasn't until, I put this on everything, man. It wasn't until I hit high school that I felt comfortable enough with, like, maybe it is okay that I'm okay with who I am, and start being all right listening to rock and roll, little bit of country and all that, man.
That's fair. Okay. Let's push it to this then. So in terms of comedy and the style of comedy you do, so one thing that always sticks out to me is that, a lot of comics talk about wanting to have a lack of filter, wanting to be talking the truth and all that stuff, but how has your life shaped how you want to perform your comedy? Outside of just watching Def Comedy Jam and, the movies and things like that, what other things help fuel your comedy?
I think... So to go on the not having a filter and speaking their truth, I think, for me personally, I think it was going through some, like, really terrible shit, like a divorce, and where, my wife left me for another man a few years back. I think it's, not having a great relationship with my mother growing up, and I won't get into too much detail, so it's not like a pity me type of thing, but I think for me, it's always been like, real life is going to hit you worse. So this idea that words and everything are off limits or hurt people in a certain way is insane to me, and I don't believe it. I put zero stock in it. You know what I mean? And at all. Like, because here's the thing, man. Like I said, I feel like I grew up in the golden age of comedy with Def Comedy Jam, and they said everything. I think there's a difference between a joke and a fucking sermon. You know what I mean? Like, if I'm over here like, well, black people are this, and white people are this, and gay people are this, and then I just keep hammering that point home, that's a bit different than making a joke that, is playfully racist or playfully sexist or playfully homophobic, because at the end of the day, man, like, to me, there's a lot of truth and sarcastic undertones in my humor. And some people get it or they don't. Okay. They like it or they don't.
That's true, and that's something you're going to find, I guess, a lot of conflict in DC, or just newer crowds today just wanting to be a little bit more on the edge of their seats and worried about walking on eggshells when you're performing for them. But I guess words don't hurt you now.
I don't like
unless Ramona pops up on one of your fucking shows.
Right, I'm saying so, but to me that shows the absurdity of it, right? Like, I let words affect me to that level when it it doesn't matter. Like,
but it does. That shit still sticks with you.
No, it stuck with me from a memory like, I don't want to say that words can't influence you, right? But it's this idea that we have now, like, you can't say this, like, you can't say retarded, you can't say, gay, you can't say like, fill in the blank. Like, obviously, I'm not going to drop.
Packer.
Yeah, like stuff like that. Like, it's getting past the line. Like, I'm not saying like everybody should be walking around and be like, "Hey, faggot." Like, that's not like the way things should be, right? Because that's different. Like, there's certain levels to it. But when we take it so far extreme, man, like we're boiling everybody down and trying to pretend like we as people don't have weird thoughts or crazy, outside the box, whatever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that makes me think about just the way I'm trying to steer my comedy now. I don't know if you've heard me say this before, but I have like the best secondhand advice of anyone you'll meet, because literally all I do is sit and listen to advice from like great influential people, like Bruce Lee or fucking like people that are influential me.
Right, because he's all over your wall and everything. Yeah.
Everybody that's influenced me with their words one way or another. But then just in terms of comedy specifically, I remember I was watching one interview with Paul Mooney, Dick Gregory, and they were sitting down getting interviewed. Somebody asked Dick Gregory a question, and it was like, comedy, it's about jokes. You're not here to preach. If you want to preach, go to the church. You should be up there. Your job is to make people laugh. And specifically with black comics, I'm not sure how much of a burden like society might cast on how you may want to do your comedy as a white guy, but for me and a lot of black comics, I think we have the burden of shouldering our past non-comedically and somehow trying to infuse that kind of like insight into our comedy style. You know what I mean? So in terms of just wanting to make people laugh, one thing I'm trying to do now is just stick more to the jokes. Right. So instead of going up there and try to make a point all the time, it's going to be a little bit more dick jokes. To try to remind people why I'm there, and also kind of to walk on those, for lack of better terms, I've been calling them Me Too eggshells. You know what I mean? Is that, what kind of, do you feel any, like, I guess, influence or burdens or points you have to make in your comedy?
I think, no question, man. That's why, like, and for those that don't know, and they care to know, I usually perform in front of mostly black crowds. Yep. That's where I go, right? So out the gate, I have to establish some level of common ground to understand that I'm one of the few white dudes, white people in this environment in general, and then also that what I'm saying is a joke. It's not serious. I make playfully racist jokes, and like I said, there's a lot of truth in my humor, and some of my quote-unquote punchlines are truth bombs that are a little, on the more effed up side, right? That. It's part of it. So I say that to say, like, there's certain things I do prior to going to these shows. Like, I'm not going to dress the way I would going to work, where I go into work with, nicer sweaters and button downs, maybe a tie or something like that. Because now it seems like I'm a little more uppity, I guess, right? So going in with that more relaxed look, and I've got my hat on, I've got my J's on, and I'm walking in there like how I normally dress, right? It's laid back, it's cool. As far as when it comes to making the comedy, I think what you said is absolutely true, man. Is stop being so much on what's the message of this joke and just make it, funny. This is the punchline, period. Because I had one lady approach me probably about 6 months ago because I said some of my punchlines and she didn't like it. She sat there the whole time, and I tried to banter with her. She was real crappy about it, and then she come up to me and was like, "You have a duty to use your platform for what much better than what you're doing now." And I was like, "Lady, this is jokes. Like, I'm not a president. I don't have enough money, enough influence out there to really do anything. And so, what do you want from me? Like, you didn't laugh. Everybody else did. What's wrong with you?" Like,
where is this at?
That was at Proud Mary's, actually.
Okay, that's definitely an older black crowd. For the shows I've done there too. I guess in terms of sticking with that line of thought of, like, feeling, do you feel like you shoulder any sort of burden in with your, whether it's on stage or off, of trying to, in terms of influence, right? You're a white dude. Mm-hmm. Privilege
Am
is
I?
a big word.
I'm just kidding, man.
I mean, hey, on the outside. Inside,
I love when people say that because they're like, you're white. Like, because I'll say something, they'll be like, you're white. And I'm like, oh my God, why didn't somebody tell me this before? No wonder my credit score is like this. I needed new furniture for 3 years. Are you kidding me?
Shit. Well, I mean, hey, dude, there's always, I don't know, maybe it was a different time for them. Maybe,
no, I mean, so.
Maybe you're talking to Stevie Wonder.
Yeah.
Who knows?
So in terms of privilege or like a burden I got to bear,
well, I guess
basically.
like with that, so like you're in front of black audiences
right.
a lot. You grew up around
right.
black people for the most part, economically,
yeah.
on the lower end.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Not above working class, just like me.
Right.
Do you feel that based on those experiences, they shaped how you carry yourself off stage and how you interact with the black community, maybe outside of the stage?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because I'm completely comfortable there. I'm not comfortable in half these places in D.C. because it is a lot of these uppity, pretentious white folks, right?
Okay.
They're the people that are going to complain and bitch about, look at what gentrification is doing to the black community, but they're the same motherfuckers that are out here doing the gentrification.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Where
Yeah.
it's like, I'll make the jokes about it, but I'm on the facetious / sarcastic side, whatever, to where it's like, I'm poking fun at that because I'm not that. Like, and the white people I know and grew up with, they're not like that. Like, we don't care what you look like for the most part.
Right.
And
unless you're ugly.
right. I mean, if you're ugly, nobody
Race
likes
can't
you.
help
Yeah. Black, white, Hispanic, it doesn't matter. If you're ugly, stay home. All right.
Please.
Amazon serves groceries now. There's no reason for you to ask to step outside.
Don't come to the show.
But so I think the biggest burden is, especially now that Trump has been in the White House. I've noticed that shift over the last year, like 100%.
The shift
There's more apprehension towards a white man now. And now, granted, that's this area. I've done comedy up in New York City. I didn't really feel that there. I've done it, pretty much New York City and here.
Okay.
I think there's that level of me having to break it down more that these are jokes because I do toe that line. Because the way people say, well, I love Trump for, he speaks his mind. And there's that level of apprehension people have to be like, is this dude serious? Is this, missing sheets right now? Is you know what I mean? Like, so there's that level of that, which also comes that responsibility of trying to make it relatable to people to say, look, I'm ignorant. But there's a lot of black folks that are ignorant. The same with, Native Americans, Asians, whatever. We have stupid people, but there's a common ground, right? Like, I was working class, you were working class.
Yeah.
It's just that way, but sometimes, people don't want to let that be, just is what it is,
I know. It must be hard for you, you know what I mean? Sort of. You know what I mean? I know it's hard. That's with
the asterisk.
Yeah, I mean, I understand it could be hard, when you're performing for all black people as a white guy, telling your joke, especially when you're towing the line in this day and age.
Right.
Is it even harder when you're holding your tiki torch? Is that something you find?
It's actually easier because they're afraid, so they're kind of whipped into, paying attention, pun intended. No.
At least plus when it's
somebody's gonna click this off and be like, Justin, why did you ever have this asshole?
Guys, man, I gotta have. Well, one of the reasons I want to have you is I know you're willing to speak your mind freely.
Right.
You have that. For lack of a better term, it's close to being a social superpower.
Right.
I think just like you were describing, like we talked about, just how uptight people are today.
Right.
How everything's all politicized and things are growing more and more extreme. It's becoming harder, I think, for anybody who wants to align themselves in the middle to be able to articulate how they feel. And although I don't like the term safe space, I understand what it does, and in the right environment, it can work.
Right.
We need, I think, more of a larger safe space for people who might be ignorant to things. They come in and be like, hey, this is where I'm coming from. I'm not trying to be fucked up.
Right.
But give me a place to
ask a question. Right. And that's what we lack, right? Like, because they're making it to where you make a mistake. Yeah. This is the end all be all and you're damned forever. And so, like, to me, my ignorance always comes from a good place. I was always raised that if I don't know the answer, ask the damn question. Yeah. So I know you're on a Facebook hiatus for 14 years now, but like, with the Kanye thing that came out, right?
Oh, that was everywhere else.
That was everywhere, right? Yeah. So that was everywhere. So me being a white guy, I made the post because this is what I think, right? I think a lot of people missed the message that he had. The message that Kanye had within all of that. Yeah. The reason I think that is because when I would try to engage people, they did like they mostly do like nowadays, and they respond emotionally.
Well, hold on. First, what message? Because he had several different.
So I'll say all that to say most people didn't watch the 44-ish minute interview, and
with who?
With Kanye and TMZ. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Okay, that one.
The one where he said slavery, he said slavery is a choice. That particular interview and that particular 44-minute segment in total, right? I watched it 3 times now to really check and see, like, what am I missing as a person, right? Okay. Because you got people in an uproar, be like, how dare he say slavery was a choice, and how dare he do this and say that, and he was just being inflammatory, he's an idiot, he should go hang himself, turn in his black card. You know how the internet is, right? I said I think people missed.
Go ahead.
So, which you're entitled to that opinion, right?
I was joking. I got something to tag it with. But go ahead.
But even if you were feeling that way, right? You're entitled to that.
Yeah.
That doesn't give me, if I'm somebody who disagrees, it doesn't give me a right to be like, well, go kill yourself. No, like legitimately, walk outside right now and hang yourself, or shoot yourself, or stab yourself to death, right? But that's where we've come on the internet, right? And all I did was say I think people missed parts of his message. And if you feel free to disagree, by all means disagree. But I think the reason being is because I think he misspoke when he said slavery is a choice. I think it was him misspeaking because it was real time. It was live. What he immediately followed it up with was this mental imprisonment that society has. And this bottlenecking of ideas that were now forced because now you got these echo chambers, the masses, everything that you talked about, right? This safe space for people that are extreme on either side to be like, don't talk about xenophobia to me because I'm far left. And then if you're on the right side, don't talk about abortion to me because I'm far right. Like, there's no in between, and it's like you said, it's harder to become middle of the road where I think most people operate, but they're afraid to say something because of these people, right?
Push you on one side or the other. And it's a good point you brought that up, because when I first heard about it, people I worked with were kind of, up in arms. Like, why would he say slavery was a choice, blah, blah, blah. And he didn't say was a choice. He said is a choice. And I had to remind him that there is a huge difference. He's not saying what happened in the past.
Completely.
Is, what he has.
And I'm glad you brought that up because that was something I watched, and on my second or third time I noticed that. I was like, damn. Which impacted me. Yeah,
and I to a degree, I agree. But at the same time, though, I want people to come to my show. So if you're on Team Kanye, fuck Kanye right now.
Yeah, fuck Kanye West and everything.
Listen to his album, though. June. He's dropping some shit in May and June. Listen to that shit.
But, but that's the thing. People can be entitled to feel like what he said was the dumbest thing ever. That's fine. Yeah. But if you want to tell people, like his whole thing, that entire interview when he first started off was about free thinking. Yeah. And they're trying to cut that out. Right. Yeah. And they're trying to cut that out. And to me, that was the ultimate example of that. Was he simply misspoke, and it was like, out of the 44 minutes, it was like 2 minutes into the interview. And then they got the other viral clip, because it just came out in clips. Like, so you got the first viral clip was him being like, slavery, that was a choice, and so people are like, oh my God. And then the one that the dude checked him, it was like, what you said was hurtful, it's inaccurate, you're misusing your influence. And it was like, so out of the 15 minutes between when he said that and then you interacted him, you didn't hear anything else he had to say. Which to me meant that you were so emotionally triggered off that one thing, you went tone deaf on everything else and didn't care to understand and empathize and say, why did he come to this conclusion?
That's true. And to be honest with you, it's going to be hard, I think, because slavery is just one of those things that, even with reparations, that's not, there's no way America, I think, is going to be able to
especially because we continue to pretend like, like that.
Graduated through other things, other institutions and all that stuff.
When, like Louis C.K. said, right? Like, it's not like when slavery ended.
One thing?
Yeah. Well, it's not like when slavery ended, it wasn't like things were just, hunky-dory for black folks the next day. Yeah. Like, well, here's your house and, have your kids back. They can't be unraped. Like, that's just...
That's fucked up.
It's true.
I know. It's fucked up. They're here.
Yeah.
They're here. Fucking, no, that's right, dude. It's just going to be one of those things where it's going to be an easy trigger point.
100%.
And understandably so. because it's not something that I think that can ever be made amends. So it's just always slavery, American history, slavery is always going to be touchy.
Right.
But so I understand where that's coming from, and I understand the tone deaf behind it.
Right.
If it's not something you ever like seriously engaged with before, otherwise
right.
it's always just going to be that trigger until you like whatever problems you're facing in life. So you learn how to deal with it. Whenever you get reminded of it, your mind's just going to freeze up and shit.
But on the opposite end of that, man, there's that old quote that goes something like, the first casualty of emotion is reason, right?
Of course,
so if you start to get too emotional on things, reasoning goes out the window. That's the first thing. Now you're reacting completely based on visceral responses, right? So when it comes to those types of things, you would think that the internet is like the perfect place to iron these details out, right? Because you got to type responses up, you got to read, you got to comprehend, and everything. So it gives you this time to look and be like, I was being kind of an asshole. Maybe I should reword this and go back. Kind of like you would, if you're at work or something like that, or you write that angry letter to stick it in your drawer or something. You would think that the internet could house this a little bit better, but it completely is just a cesspit of hatred and, cat videos.
Yeah, dude, because it's where people go to share their opinions. Like, it's unfiltered opinions. You deal with the consequences, but that's essentially what social media has been created for people to just go ahead and share their opinions. Like, have you transition a little bit? Did you see the video, the White House Correspondents video?
Yeah, with Michelle Wolf?
Yeah.
I watched 19 some odd minutes?
Yeah. It was a good video. I loved her jokes.
Yo.
But in terms of just like how people are going to be uptight to a degree, I know there's a lot of backlash. A lot of news sites, like, before I even saw the video, I saw like 20 different articles saying, who the hell does she think she is? Who is this woman?
And what was unfortunate was they were clips. I have a problem with that. When it's ever in clips.
Oh, yeah, snippets. It's taken out of context.
I hate
people
that. And it's intentionally done. The same thing with, like I said, not to go back, but with the Kanye deal. And then with this, it's snippets and it's clips. Intentionally to sell a point or idea. Yeah. And my dad is on Facebook now.
Okay.
And this is going to sound like very typical, right? Like, he's not racist.
Saying that to warn the children?
No, that too, right? That's why there's no school near him.
Thank God.
But he's that guy that was up in arms, like, how dare she be so disrespectful? And I was like, Pop, you didn't say a damn bit of nothing about her Hillary jokes when she was clowning on them or the Democratic Party. You had a specific problem when it came to...
your guy.
Right. And somebody, who was it? I think it was Olsen, Parker. You know Olsen, right? Yeah. So he posted something. He said, you can't say that you love Donald Trump because he speaks his mind and then get mad at a comedian for doing what they do.
Yeah.
And I said that to my dad, and we had like a little solid argument about it. He's like, well, it was just disrespectful, da-da-da-da-da. Did you say anything when people were making fun of Obama and such? Like, I hate the lack of fairness.
Yeah.
Like, and I combat that because... you've got family and all that stuff that'll sit there and say it. It's like, no, be fair if you're going to give criticism. That's all I ask.
True. I mean, the thing for me was, she went after everybody beautifully. She had a
100%.
lot of solid jokes. I mean, who am I compared to her right now? But
right.
Like, I found a lot of her stuff funny. But one thing I can honestly say, though, was she had two things that bother me. One, her voice.
Her voice was terrible. Oh my God.
I hate Jewy voices.
Dude.
I really do. Unless you're saying this loan has been approved, I don't want to hear them shits. And then two, I don't know if I will preface it by saying I'm a little what's the M word where you're
N word?
M.
Oh, I was gonna say, don't ask me that on here.
Just not baiting machismo, but like you know what I mean, where it's like sexism, but it's not.
Like I was gonna say machismo, but I don't know. Like,
whatever the word is, where like
toxic masculinity.
So I have a little bit. I forgot the T word. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of that. I think I have a little bit of.
But can we?
Terrance has, but the black version, and probably a little bit more digestible. With
so
glasses.
First off, with her voice, it sounded like she had been sucking helium and then got throat fucked by like two dudes right before that.
Like
but at least she acknowledged it, right? She did acknowledge it.
Yeah, she went the good thing about it was, like, when you're going to go after people hard, or if you have harder shit, they always tell you to start with self-deprecating.
You have
shit. And she had a lot.
Put yourself on there.
So you're willing to say, "Hey,
I know I'm not perfect." Right.
Exactly. But that's one thing I appreciate. But her voice was one, and one thing I think that could have helped her, which I'm not sure if it's me thinking that women don't have to have it as much because it's not the world they have to grow up in. She wasn't charming. And I think that's one thing that could have made it more digestible. It was her constant voice.
Are you saying from like a look standpoint?
Both. I mean, she looked fine. She looked attractive on stage.
Well,
but
welcome to being a man. Welcome to being a man, lady. Dude. All right, when you don't look the greatest and your voice is annoying, it's like being a dude.
Charm.
Yeah,
to get by,
have a little bit better personality.
It was like any person could have went up there and read those same jokes and got that same kind of feeling, performed it the same way. But if she had just a dose of charm.
If it would have been like a Nikki Glaser going up there.
Yeah, although I haven't seen her.
Oh, so like a Michelle Buteau.
Just anybody charming. It doesn't have to be a comedian.
I guess. But you're saying like more attractive or a better voice or a combination of the two?
Like charming. It's a way you could present yourself to make yourself likable. Maybe a smile at the right time. Maybe.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
Just like the things
she was too dry. Yeah.
That talk to them.
Okay.
The things you have to do when you can't rely on looks, like us two.
Yeah, right.
Like,
Yeah.
Hey,
I think that's fair enough.
But no, outside of that, yeah, charming. I think charm would have helped because everybody was quiet. And actually, I love that shit when you've got solid jokes and people are just shutting the fuck up. I love that.
Well, it goes to show that they're paying attention. One, and you're making people think.
Fucking Sarah Sanders.
What I loved about it though was it was like 3 minutes in.
Yeah.
And she's like, "This is what you guys get for hiring me. You should have done your research." Something along that line.
Yep.
Period. That's on you at that point. You want to say how disrespectful she is? That's your fault.
I think partially that was a Me Too hire, which I'm totally fine with. In that, if it's going to make people who felt disenfranchised get more opportunities, I'm all for that. But at the same time, though, yeah, they should have done your research. If you wanted an Ellen DeGeneres, maybe you should have got Ellen. I think that's what they were expecting from any female comic, but instead, or Amy Schumer,
right?
Or shit and pussy jokes.
But. Like I told my dad, and the meme and the constant kind of rhetoric that came out of that from sensible people it was just jokes, number one. Number two, the most offensive thing that she had to say.
It wasn't all just jokes.
Well, no, we were talking about real life situations. Yeah. But who am I to say anything about that? Because I talk about real life situations with reality as part of the punchline that makes people a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so when we talk about that, I'm all for it. From a sheer joke writing standpoint, those roast jokes were on point. Yeah. So I like that. But to me, the most offensive thing about that entire 19, 20-minute routine, Flint still does not have clean water. You know what I mean?
Love that. Yep.
Like people, like I said that same thing to my dad. I was like, you're over here like getting upset because she did it to Sarah Sanders, and you're saying Sarah Sanders is a class act. Like, okay, you're entitled to that opinion, but if you're not that upset that it's been over 365 days, it's like what, 440, 450, 460 some odd days?
About 2 years.
Yeah.
2-3 years.
Are you shitting me? Like, that's what you're upset about? That to me is the pinnacle of American retardation. Right? Like, we are so up our own asses with our own beliefs, making it feel like, well, we're this and we're that. We're not even good people overall, man, because we're letting most of our people just fucking die by the wayside. You know what I mean? Like, it is what it is.
Yeah, and I mean, half of it, I do, as I read more, as I learn more, like, half of that shit does have to do with media. They choose the story.
100%.
So, like, that, if all your sources that you have available to you, because not everybody knows how to use the internet. Not everybody has like a wide, diverse group of thinking friends that would be into different things, and that's one thing I always try to make sure I have around me. If you don't have those different ideas and different knowledge banks coming in to interact with, then you're limited to what you put in front of you.
Which is why I'm thankful for my time in the military, because it gave me that. Yeah, it took me outside of my box.
Like, how did that help shape you? One as a person, and if you want to tie it back into your comedy and what you do now. I
mean, to me, it hit that nail on the head that what you said. I would have grown up in this lifestyle, at this box, in this mental, imprisonment for, to the Kanye deal, right? Yeah. I would have been in that deal, because if you would have talked to me 7 years ago, right, and you would have brought up the term white privilege, I'd have been like, yo, I was with all my friends. We were, without meals at times. We didn't understand. I didn't have name brand clothes, and I was shopping at, Goodwills and the Walmarts.
Hey, shout out to Goodwill.
Hey, shout out to Goodwill. Fuck you, Goodwill. I'll take Salvation Army over you. All right? Yeah, because it's cheaper. Goodwill doesn't. Goodwill marks up their prices so much. If you look at how much actually goes in the community and all that stuff, it's ridiculous.
But they always hire. The one thing that sticks out to me, all the people that have special needs for the most part. So
nobody cares about that.
I do, man.
It's nice. I won't knock that.
if I can only help one special person read a book.
Right.
Yeah.
You
know what I mean? That's I feel some okay. I'll pay $4 for a fucking used t-shirt.
That works. But no, you're good. What was I saying? Oh, the whole white privilege thing. So I grew up in that. So if you would have been like white privilege, I was very much like, there was no privilege. I didn't have a silver spoon in my mouth. I wasn't grown up, having the things that I have now. I had to work for it. Yep. And that whole negative connotation towards white privilege is almost like, life is given to you. You don't have to work. And it took me outside of my box and growing up and spending time in the military and around friends and around other friends with other ideas, because while my friends were black, they still were more on that conservative side. You know what I mean? Like, because it's just what we were conditioned to do, Yeah. And so it was taking those ideas that challenged me, I guess, offended me at that time, because it was different. And I think that's part of the comedy thing is like, I think things and ideas that offended me or offend others is because it challenges your train of thought. It challenges the way you think. It challenges the way you feel. And you don't get a feel for something outside of the way you see the world. When if you take that as an opportunity to say, well, why did it make me feel the way that I felt? And then you really break it down, you might be open to a whole new world, which is what I was. I started seeing, unfortunately, we see more and more of those video surface of unarmed black folks getting shot, right? Yeah. And I equate it to something like that. Like, I'd be like, well, police are just doing their job. I was of that mindset too, And then it took me sitting here looking at it from just a sheer, like, relationship standpoint, right? Yeah. If we're in a relationship together and I keep hitting on you and you keep telling me to stop, right? And I'm like, well, I did it because I felt like it. And then we go through, we have an okay time, and then I do it again, and you say, I don't like that you did it, but I say, oh, I did it because I felt like it. Like, You're not going to stick around and tolerate it, right? Well, it's the same thing with police brutality. You can't keep sitting here saying, well, I feared for my life, I thought it was a gun. It's the same rhetoric. That's not a catch-all, end-all, whatever. Yeah. Now, for anybody out there that's all pro cops and everything, understand I served in a law enforcement capacity my first 6 years. So I understand like the more intricacies. The whole idea of why didn't he shoot him in the leg, that's nonsensical. And if you want, we can have a whole fucking podcast about that, because just firing a pistol, you've never fired a pistol if you think that shooting somebody in the leg is going to stop them. Then two, something, and this is for you too, JB, like 100%. If people ever want to know, well, why does the officer always get away with it? Why do they never get charged? Look up the Graham versus Connor case. That is an excellent case, and it establishes why the law is written the way that it's written. I'm not saying that I'm pro it. I'm not saying anything. I'm saying simply from a factual standpoint so you can educate yourself. The Graham versus Connor case for law enforcement. It basically it states why the officer on scene must be believed for his perspective rather than 20/20 hindsight. And it's very interesting, to say the least. And that's something that we learned in that law enforcement capacity where it's like, okay, I'm seeing a little bit behind the curtain as to why things are the way they are.
Okay. Because I was talking to this another comic named Will Thomas, local dude.
Yep.
Been doing it for about a decade or so. Recently retired.
Baltimore cop.
Yeah, police. We were talking the other night, just chopping up and talking about just what material we're working on and things like that. And he said he used to work on, or used to do a lot of material about, being a police officer. He's still trying to do it now. But he's trying to find the balance.
Yeah. And
giving the police perspective, but also making it funny.
Right.
Because like there's a touring comedians, been on, I think Bad Boys and stuff, but Timmy Hall.
Yep.
Known as the
comic cop.
Yeah, comic cop, who I think treads the line fairly well. But then I was talking with Will too, like how do you talk about that without pigeonholing yourself, I think, to a degree by calling yourself a comic cop, because then that's the expectation you set forth when audiences come to see you.
Plus, that moniker's already taken. You don't want to seem like a ripoff.
Yeah, you're both
especially because they're both Baltimore.
Both black.
Yeah.
Both under 5'6". So
yeah.
it's like you don't have a lot going for you outside of that shit. But just in terms of, I guess, like giving the counter perspective, the side that people don't see,
right?
And trying to make that funny. How do you take your more sensitive stuff, since you do base a lot of your material on reality,
right?
And there's a lot of truth-based punchlines. How do you make yourself write or deliver material that will give possibly both sides of the coin's perspectives, but also making it digestible? Because it's going to be hard. Like, if you know Anthony Jeselnik and guys of that vein, who are like dark dudes, like a Tosh. Dark dudes. I'm going to see
Jeselnik in June. Like,
you
I love.
Haven't seen him yet.
Not live.
That's one of the first guys I saw.
Not live.
Shakespeare.
Like,
I love fucking Shakespeare.
I love his albums. You know, whether we're talking Caligula, Shakespeare, if we're talking Thoughts and Prayers on Netflix. Like, I think that dude is, from a simple joke crafting perspective, that dude is like top notch. He's like a Stephen Wright, you know, Mitch Hedberg level, to where it's literally set up punchline, set up punchline.
You're getting carried away. You're starting to mention his name around the wrong.
No. I'm talking about writing. I'm talking about writing, simply writing, because there's no fat on the jokes. That's all I'm saying.
Oh, he's very economic.
If we're talking about material wise, he's no doubt.
I would say he's on the level of like an Ian Edwards.
Yeah.
You know Ian Edwards?
Yeah. Okay. Because he goes around with Joe Rogan, right?
I don't even know anymore. I know. He's mainly known for his writing on shows. But my bad. We'll chop it up about that shit in a minute. But in terms of how do you make your comedy digestible if you know it's going to be that kind of hard-edged stuff that at first glance might not carry well?
I think it's about that relatability, right? Okay. It's making myself relatable. So it's always, if I'm going to do some of the heavier stuff, it's always starting with me growing up as white trash. Okay. And what's the connotation with white trash? You're stupid. You're halfway racist. You know, maybe your teeth ain't that good. Meth. You know, you fuck your sisters. Stuff like that, right? And I always say something like that, but like I'm white trash, but I'm not so white trash that I fuck my sister. Like something that, like, oh shit, oh my god, like
that should be the name of your autobiography.
Yeah, but maybe at that point I will fuck my sister. You know, you never know. Like
to be continued.
Yeah. We're still learning. So, one, it's that relatability. Everybody has to have that, because it's like you said with Michelle Wolf, right? Yeah. If you don't have charm, if you don't have likability, you can be saying the funniest things out there, from a well-crafted joke to the best material, but if there's something about you that people don't like, it's going to stand out. Yeah. So that her voice really stood out, where if she had a softer, more accepting voice, or a more like commanding, like...
Oh, that's not... Hold on, I don't want to make that point. Her voice would be unbearable no matter how she made me feel.
I completely agree, right? But it's one of those things that is tagging right along with what you said, right? Yeah. She's got to have that likability, and if you don't have that, you lose... I think you lose at about 20% of the effectiveness of the joke.
Oh, you do.
At least.
You do.
Because of that. Right?
Yeah.
So I think when it comes to how do I particularly do it, I don't know, man. I guess I just write and I smile a lot. I giggle a lot. Because I do find the stuff funny, even when it's a little effed up. And to me, it's that mental chess game of like, how do I plug and play my old stories and old jokes and punchlines into this new audience? Because you find not every setup and punchline is the same. It doesn't go to the same flow. You know that, right? Your joke that you do at this spot tonight and you go to another one 20 minutes later is likely not going to be the same format, just because the audience is different. So you got to find that way to shape it. So I think that's literally getting that feel for what the crowd likes and understanding it. When it comes to the writing, man, I think it's just writing it and trying it. It's a lot of trial and error. To say this is what I did before, it didn't work. This is what I'm doing now. It got hits. All right, cool. Let's stick to that side and try and iron it out.
So you do a lot of heavy editing for your jokes.
Yeah.
As you should.
I pretty much anytime I'm driving into the city, I'm likely dissecting a joke or three that I've either done or one that's impending. You know, like it's in my brain right now, and I'm plugging and playing. I'm like, man, damn, I should have said it like this. And what I meant was that, and it's this, so I'm going to input that, or damn, I just really thought of this. This is really funny, and I'm going to insert it here, right?
Yeah.
So,
with that too, because I do a lot of editing, but I also work on like a lot of material at the same time, which is tough because it's going to Bruce Lee. This quote isn't on my wall, but I have like quotes from like a lot of different influences on my wall. But one that's not up there that I distinctly remember is that the one he said about I don't fear a man that's practiced 10,000 different techniques one time. I fear the man that's practiced one technique 10,000 different times. And like, and in terms of the editing and stuff, it's like you really need to spend time working on your material. Like, what's the average amount of time you would say you work on a joke that you want to keep?
Oh man, average. Every bit, at least, and this is probably being more on the conservative side, right?
Yeah. I mean, can't help it, but
I think it's at least a week, right? Like
that's it.
That like at least a week, like where I'm focused on one particular segment of my joke, to iron it out, and I'm talking like week wise to where like I'm literally thinking of it the entire 35-minute commute in, the entire 35-minute commute out. While I'm at my work, like a bit.
Okay.
Like a bit to where I can plug and play this.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might even just be like as simple as the punchline. I stewed on a punchline.
That's what?
I'm saying like, you know what I mean, man. But like, it might just be the punchline because I'm like, I don't like this punchline.
Yeah.
And I'm stewing on it for a week, and it's it's like I'm getting stonewalled. You know, you get that writer's block, whatever, or something that comes. Like, I don't like the way that sounds. It's okay, but it's only like 60% there. Why can't I get it to 75, or why is it not just falling into place? I would say on average, something that quote unquote simple is at least a week, at least.
I will push back a little bit because I think every part of a joke is so important, especially when you want to be economic and stuff. Like, I would say for jokes I like, which is few and far between that I do. Like, I have jokes I enjoy, but like and want to make part of a 5, 10, 15, whatever minute set.
Right.
A few months, 3 to 6 months at least, for the whole joke.
So on that, I would say it takes months.
Yeah,
like if we're saying like ones that I want to keep, I want to tweak and keep tweaking. I think in all honesty, man, like I have some from when I first started 5 years ago that just now started falling into place, because I think that's also part of your growth period too. Not just as a comic, but as a person, right? Things evolve a little bit. Your viewpoint rounds out a little bit more. You as a person become more sure, and things just sometimes it's almost like when you have somebody's name or a word on the tip of your tongue, you can't think of it, and nobody in your office can think of it, right? And you're like, damn it, why can't I come up with this word? And then 20 minutes later, you're off doing something, and then you think of that word, you're like, here it was. It's almost like that sometimes,
that
right?
Random epiphany, dude.
And you're like,
crazy.
That's perfect. That's where it goes there. So yeah, that definitely takes months, if not years.
And then the best part is when you get that epiphany, you show up to the club,
yeah.
You're like, here's my premise, here's the setup, here's the punchline, and it's fucking cooking. It's like, what am I doing with my life?
That's the worst, man. Like that's what I always say. Like I think it's just, it makes you feel so lonely, right? Like on a physical, emotional level, like you're like, I want to go home, go to bed.
Yeah.
Don't talk to nobody. Nobody talk to me. Like
fuck this book.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I misunderstood your question, but yeah, I think it takes a long time. I was thinking more specifically on a specific bit. If I'm trying to iron it out and get it like ready to present to where I feel comfortable first time, it takes me, I would say, about a week to where I feel like really good. Now some of them I'll jump out there a little bit earlier because I feel like I've been in long enough to where I've got enough chops to where I can bullshit my way through it.
Sure.
Like, not trying to shit on anybody, but to where I can play with it, to where I'm not 100% comfortable with where it's at, but I at least want to get it out there so I can hear it, I can have it recorded, I can say, I shit the bed on that, so let me reel that back and come it in.
Yeah.
But as far as like finalizing, man, months, year, 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, even then, like Godfrey, Godfrey.
Yeah.
He has jokes he's been working on for like 6-7 years.
Yeah.
That he still uses to this day. That he literally spent those whole years working on it and his set and stuff. So I guess in terms of editing, before we get to like the last 2 or 3 questions, one approach I use Actually, I use several different approaches because I consider myself a jack of all trades, master of none type. So I don't know what's the best way for me to do editing. So I have sessions where I'll write something out. This is all in one joke or one bit. I'll write it out. I'll repeat it out loud, and that's just two different mediums where I can interact with it, seeing it, and then hearing it, saying it, and then also listen to a recording of it when I've done it. Do you find one that works best for you, or how do you approach your stuff?
I think I'm me personally, I like to record it and then go back and watch it. But sometimes, I wouldn't say sometimes, I think every time I watch it, I cringe. Every time I watch or hear me, I cringe.
Yeah, that's going to happen.
And I'm like, dude, I don't know why I don't just jump out of a window right now and just call it quits, because you are terrible at this. That's how it sounds to me like every time. And
well, if it helps, you do live in a one-floor house.
I'm just saying, I might go to the roof and jump, all right?
Hey,
I appreciate the motivation, all right? But me personally, man, I feel like I accomplish more when it's in my mind and it's absorbed there. I'll have it written down. I'll have it recorded, either audio, visually, whatever.
Yeah.
But I feel like when it's toyed around in my mind, I do so much like air writing, if you will, in my mind, to where it's like, nah, that sounds stupid, because I can visualize me performing it and saying, that just doesn't make sense and that's stupid. Whereas with the recordings and everything, you basically just have it is what it is. Yeah, that's it.
That's the stupid right there.
Right.
You have no choice.
Right, and you're like, that just sucks. Like I can't not unhear that, and it's like that. All I know at that point is that just doesn't fit. And I'm not saying that that's not a great tool to have, but toying it around in here to where, okay, I might go out and do something that's a little mindless for a little bit, like watch a YouTube video and then revisit it. And that's why I said, like toying around with it for that, like at least week long, for a new thing that popped up in my head. I think it's kind of that, like it's air writing for me.
That's true. And when you're doing your editing too, one thing I toyed with considering sometimes is just, when I'm doing editing, who am I doing the editing for? It's like, am I editing it for something that fits me? Am I having an audience in mind when I'm thinking of this? Normally it's what sounds funny to me, because I feel more comfortable delivering something that's funny to me versus like for a specific group of people.
You have to.
Yeah.
You because that was one thing that I felt grimy about when I first started. I was bombing regularly. Like after my first 2 times, because my first time on stage, it went really well, which I think is a terrible thing for a comic, right? Because then you're like, this is Madison Square Garden's next, right? Like I'm Kevin Hart and that's it, right? Like, I think that's a terrible thing. But it's also a positive thing, because at least you're like, maybe I have the chops for this, and then you keep going. Whereas if I would have ate a complete dick that day, I don't know that I'd still be doing it, because I'd be like, well, that blew a cock and I'm done. It would have been a one and done. So with that, I spent a lot of time bombing, and then I got advice that, you always get advice, and some is more valuable than others. Yeah. And one of the things that I remember was, because I kept bombing, I started to do the topical stuff and, stuff that was just like, it was whatever to me. I didn't believe it. And somebody told me, they said, you have to write things that you find funny, because if you're writing it for other people to find funny, they won't. No. Which is 100% true. Like, even as fucked up as my mind might go, or your mind might go, and then you take it and present it to an audience. Right, and that's the thing. Everybody has a level of being fucked up. Yeah. Whether people want to admit it or not, everybody has a level to it. Yeah. And some might be darker than others. It just is what it is. But I get much more payoff, more bang for my buck, more gratification out of the fact, like, when I can take something that I know is messed up, but it was my personal thought, I wrote it down, I rewrote it, I reworked it, and I come out and I regurgitate it to an audience, and they really laugh about it. That's way more than, well, here's my Donald Trump joke of the day. Like, here's my which I think are great writing exercises. If you could take a couple of headlines and then bam, 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 bam. It's a great writing exercise, but you still got to stick to what you find is funny. You almost have to mold the audience to you rather than you mold to the audience.
Oh, not even almost. You have to.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's how you build your audience. That's how you get your comfort. Once they see you're comfortable,
right,
they'll be comfortable. But all that to say, I just wanted to share with everyone, this is how hard we work on our dick and piss and sometimes racist jokes. You know what I mean? This is
It's at least 2 days.
You might be surprised, but there's actual thought behind this stuff, which is better than we can say for
it takes people. A lot for me to come out there and admit that my pee smelled like tuna earlier today. You know, like it takes a while.
Yeah, especially because you don't eat tuna.
So exactly.
That's fucking gross. All right, so I think we got a couple more questions, and then you can plug whatever shows you got coming up and stuff. But in terms of just like influence and stuff, of course, you got Jeselnik, I heard, Stephen Wright, I'm assuming Hedberg. Who else?
I would say definitely.
And how?
Jeselnik is definitely a big influence, more so now that I've actually gotten into comedy because he wasn't around back in the day. Yeah. Like I really like his spreading of the topics, obviously, because he's very dark, and the fact that there's no fat to it. Like when this dude writes jokes, it's set up punchline. It's bang 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 bang.
Guys, edits.
Nice. Right, you know.
First time is
his finalized version of what is presented is bang bang. As far as like my big influences, man, like growing up, Bernie Mac. I'll never forget that Def Comedy joint when he had those jeans with on it, that, and then he said, "I ain't scared of you motherfuckers." Yeah. And when he said kick, he started doing that. I will never forget that. Like I will never ever forget that. I saw it live back in the day, watching it, and I remember like that stuck in my head, and that's like the quintessential Bernie right there, right? Like everybody sits there and
that was the first Bernie the nation grew to know.
Right.
Because he started touring immediately.
Right, but it was because of that. And this wasn't even I don't think that was his first time on Def Comedy.
Second.
I was going to say.
The first time he did Take Me Out to the Ball.
Yeah, and man, like it was just that level of like confidence and going out there and saying what he wanted to say and saying, despite what you think of me or whatever, bam, this is what it is and you're going to take it or not, it's there. That struck me, man, as a kid. So that, by far, is one of the biggest influences. And then as comedy kind of went on, as life went on, I think it was just everything in life. Like
okay. So not necessarily comedians then.
I mean, because like I grew up watching like the Hamburgers and the Chris Thomas, who's a fucking DC legend though. If y'all don't know about him,
Hamburger still tours.
Hamburger still tours. He was over at Meek's a couple weeks ago. Yeah. So same with Chris Thomas. He's always out there because Mike Brooks is Def Comedy. So Mike Brooks, another legend. I would say honestly, like I got to watch those guys and it was very good. But my biggest influences, like in comedy in general, are guys like a Jeselnik now, who's on that unattainable level for somebody like me, and then some of these local guys like a Mike Brooks, like a Bad Guy Flex, like
shout out Flex,
shout out my man Flex, shout out Mike Brooks, man. You want to talk about like people that know how to host, a dude that even people that influence me in ways that like I wouldn't expect them to, like a KY Nelly. If you never met KY out of Baltimore,
I thought it was Kai Nelly.
I did too until I met him. It's KY Nelly, but it's KY Nelly. Totally different. Because that dude knows how to host and he gets the energy up, and it influenced me in a certain way. My man Spoon, Tony Spoon Stewart, an OG in the game. Yeah. We're talking about guys that have been around a while, man, and I've been fortunate enough to share the stage, some conversation time off on the side. Yeah. Those are like more real-time influences where I've got to actually sit back and be a student of the game and see how they do it. Like, I'll never forget, man, it was like 5 people in a spot in Silver Spring, and Flex was trying to open up a room or doing something out there. It was like 5 people. Okay. I went up there and I did my thing and I ate a bag of dicks. Because it was they just weren't feeling it. But you've been around him, man. He's got that energy, everything to be able to just rope everybody. Like, to be able to go, like that dude can go for 2 hours.
3 hours.
3 hours.
Show at Primaries by himself for 3 hours.
And
by himself.
Not even winded.
No.
Not even winded. So that shit, I never forget when I first saw him. It was at Sartique's Lounge, and the way he worked the crowd. Yeah, Sartique's.
He sounds sexy. Go ahead.
So it was some fucking like rental place that you do. Like you got to rent it out.
Rent the room and
right.
Do the show. Okay.
So it was something along those lines, and I just remember when he stepped in, he commanded attention and this authoritative power, and you're like, okay,
T-shirt on his head.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, and when he got it started, it was like on 100, and it stayed 100 and above. the entire hour and a half that he worked, and I was like, I've never seen anything like this.
Not without crack like that.
Right, you know, and so I think that's what I've been able to be very fortunate and catch influence. You know, and even in little things with like you when we were first, you know, dinking around like Beer Baron and RFD back in the day when I first met you.
Shout out RFD.
Yeah, shout out Ralph Cooper, man. Ralph is another dude that influenced me from his. I loved his fucking hosting style, like him. And the way that he opened up RFD to set the rule state the way that he did, period, point blank. Coop, you're my motherfucking man. So, with RFD was to me one of the funniest, and I was very fortunate to fall into that. And then I met you out at Beer Baron, and you were even giving me tips, even though I'd been in longer than you. You were more plugged into the scene because you live here, and you were telling me, you know, DC stand up is one, and this that way. And I didn't know that, man. I was literally at the mercy of, you know. I won't shout any venues or people out because I don't want to put people on the spot. I was more at the mercy of the more popular ones that operate based off their clicks and stay that way. Yeah. And so, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the ones that are great for the scene.
Wink, wink. So I would think those are my biggest influences, which I'm grateful for.
True. Okay. And then last question. Goals. Always one. Actually, no. 2 more questions. First one being goals. What is give me a long term and a short term goal you have for comedy. Short term, year, long term. At least 5.
I think my 5-year goal is to hopefully be eating off the mic. To be able to walk away, to walk away from a day job, be a full-time comedian.
Only with stand-up.
Doing just stand-up.
Okay.
You know, if it leads to other endeavors, I'm not opposed to it because I did that thing for TV One like 2 years ago, something like that.
The show?
Yeah.
Frankie J.
With Frankie J. Okay. I was out there on Thou Shalt Not. I did that. I was so legit, man. I got cut out, so all you saw was me blurry in the background. That was my 5 minutes of fame. So I'm not like opposed to it. It was a cool experience. It's not something that I necessarily know that I'd want to do all the time because there was a lot of standing around, a lot of waiting, a lot of like whatever.
Waiting for your turn,
but I mean, I don't think I'd turn it down again because it was still kind of cool and kind of fun.
You got credits, right?
Yeah, I mean, who could say that? You know, like not a whole lot of people could say that. So I thought that was kind of, you know, cool to be a little nobody white trash from nowhere. Like that's pretty cool. So my 5-year plan is to be able to walk away, eat off the mic, and have no day job other than that. So that's 5 years. As far as short-term goals, I think it's to continue. I think it's short and long term to continue to just be a student of the game and learn, right? Like I think in particular, I think my crowd work has to get better. Not that it's terrible, but it's definitely not good. Because I think crowd work is hard to master, man. How do you wield the
pros who have it?
Yeah, I'm saying, so how do you wield that mic power to come back and forth and then choop, and then how do I overcome a lot of these issues of the apprehension and the hesitation towards a white dude to be grabbing the mic at an all-black establishment and saying the things that I say, because it seemed to have become a little bit more difficult. How do I adjust my material and adjust my stuff to that audience? Not adjust me, but adjust the material to make it, okay, now it's more palatable.
True. And how often do you struggle with that, you think? Every time you get in front of black audience?
It's not. It's definitely not every time. It's certain ones. When they're the very like ratchet ass crowds, I can't relate to them on the same level because they're the type of crowd that want, you know, the comic, if it's you up there, they want you to drop the N-word 77 times within a 5-minute span. Motherfucker every, you know what I'm saying? They're the type, they're the type that want to be, you know, joned on, you know, roasted, whatever the hell you want to call it, right? Joning is roasting for people that ain't DC. That's what they want. They want that. They want this, let's get hood for no reason, and then I record it and it goes viral because they want a piece of it. And it's like, no, I work my ass off for this, whether you think it or not. Like, I work my ass off and so do the other people here. I'm not willing to do that for you. But how do I balance that line better? That's a goal.
True. You're there to give them a show.
Right.
It's not the show maybe that they expect from Instagram.
Right.
Shit. So I guess in terms of wanting to do all that, and this is something I want to talk about earlier, but I just remember now. Carving your own lane. How important is it for you, especially given, you know, the tighter landscape of comedy there is? Like, there's more venues, but people are putting more rules, I think. Mm-hmm. The more places you go. And then on top of that, like we touched on before, there's cliques that's going on in comedy and things like that make it difficult to get into.
Right.
Honestly, some of the bigger rooms, whether it's a mic or a club,
100%.
Local club specifically, like how important is it to you? And then what are ways you've gone about on your own to carve your own lane?
So how important is paramount? It's paramount because I like I said, grew up with the 80s comedy and the Def Comedy Jam and the early 90s. I grew up in the 90s, right? But watched 80s comedies because that was the stuff, right? And obviously Deep Throat, I'm all about that.
Debbie Does Dallas.
But it's paramount, and it's that old Steve Martin quote, right? You got to be so good they can't ignore you, right? Like that's the mantra in which I try to live by. I've met, quote unquote, several, higher up there DC comics several times.
Sure.
And what I mean by that is these people have been around DC, they're known well in DC, and we've met for the first time 4 times now. And I'm not going to name any names, and it's not their fault. I'm not saying that. I'm not throwing any shade. Yeah. I recognize them. I'm very good with faces. I'm very good with names, but I'm obviously still a nobody to them at this point. I get that. I understand that.
Another white guy with a beard.
Right. Exactly. Which I'm very proud of, by the way. But that's important to me to change that. Yeah. To where it's like now, I've seen this dude around. I've heard of this dude, and this is what he brings to the table, right?
Establish yourself.
Right. You want that to where it's like, okay, so, but I want it without having to ride coattails of anybody. Like, I don't want to sit here and tie my name to somebody to be like, well, here I am now, good. Like, because then it's like, hey, you're such and such friend. No, I'm me, period. So I think that's why it's paramount to carve your own lane. As far as steps, that's why, I've opened up a couple rooms, done stuff like that. And that's honestly why, for probably my career's detriment, I've avoided DC fairly frequently because my comedy's not well received around here.
Just DC? Or
definitely
more so in front of certain audiences. Because I know in DC, if you go do certain rooms, different parts of the city.
Yeah, I would say
people in seats by any stretch.
I would definitely say certain crowds.
Okay.
Right? So certain areas of DC, if you will.
Sure.
You definitely have I chose to avoid because it didn't do anything for my confidence, man. I'm sitting there like eating a dick regularly in front of a bunch of strangers. So I essentially drove an hour and a half, from home to go and talk shit in front of these people to have them be like, we hate you, essentially. And then I got to drive an hour and a half back and then still get up at 4 o'clock in the morning.
But isn't that just part of
it's part of the learning curve, right? Yeah. You have to have a deep appreciation for that, which I do.
Yeah.
Which now I can go home more confident, not be like tearing up, being like, like that level of like soul punching, like gut wrenching failure.
Yeah. Like a piece of cardboard.
Right.
You couldn't make 2 people laugh.
Right.
Fucking Northwest DC.
Right. So you've got all that stuff. So I think that's part of that steps where it's like I've had to alter my path. My path isn't necessarily going multiple times a night in multiple venues a night in DC like some of these other cats have. Even some of these newer ones. Some of these newer ones, man, good for them. They've blown up way more in a year than I have in 5 because they've gone to Magoobies and now they've headlined and they've gone to Baltimore Comedy Factory and now, or not headlined, hosted, I'm sorry. And then they've hosted at Baltimore Comedy Factory. Yeah. They've gotten on at, other shows at the Improv to where they've, done, the local open mic blowing up on the scene type of shows and all that. Like, again, no shade. Like, I got mad love for all y'all, man. Keep doing you. There's definitely a level of trying not to take it personal. You know what I mean?
You can't make it a competition.
You can't, right? And sometimes it gets harder, like especially when you're in your low points. Like if I eat a dick all week and then I see somebody post a highlight, it's like, man, this motherfucker. You know what I'm saying, right? It's like,
what do I gotta do?
Yeah, it's like,
to get
right
in your shoes,
right. So it's little things like that, man. But it's you got to stay true to you.
Okay.
You got to stay true to your humor. You got to stay true to your style. Period.
Sure. So in terms of, you say you open a couple rooms. What other steps are you taking to kind of carve out your own lane?
I think it's sticking to my principles when it comes to the comedy, in the aspect that nothing is off limits because at the end of the day it is jokes. And it's almost like when Patrice O'Neal, which I failed to mention, Patrice O'Neal's a huge influence too. May he rest in peace. Yep. I've always loved Patrice, man. His style, To just be able to rope in people was legit. But he's one of those people that was the elephant in the room, was one of the uncut scenes to where he basically said to point out a lady who wasn't laughing.
Okay, yeah.
And then the lady was like, well, I'm just waiting on you to make me laugh, something like that. He's like, you hear everybody else around you laughing. Like, if you're that miserable, I can't make you laugh, which is 100% true. Yeah, like it's sticking to your principles, it's sticking true to you, sticking to your material, and continuing to refine it and saying what you have to say. And another quote, and I realize I'm getting kind of preachy with all these quotes, but Chris Rock influenced me way back in the day when I was watching the interview. No, that too, you know. Damn it all. I can't say it, otherwise I would, you know. I'm just kidding. I mean, somebody wants to fucking kill me right now, you know. But he said, when he noticed when he was going through it and he was still up and coming, he said a lot of comics were saying a lot of the same things, or they were along the same lines, right? He ended up saying, what are they not saying? What are they missing? And that's something I constantly ask myself. What are they not saying? What are they missing from this side? So we can all say certain things. We all can believe certain things. But if you're all saying it and saying it along the same way, that means there's this whole other side that's being untapped. Like, right or wrong, you got to find a way to tap into that, to at least expose it, to bring it out there as to why it might be true or why it's completely false. But you got to find a way to incorporate that too. Because not everything is so one-sided and absolute, right? Yeah. So that's kind of how I try to go about it.
Okay, cool. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. Terrance, where can people find you? Tell them about your room.
Man, you can find me all around my house, which I won't tell you where I live.
Waldorf. Go find
you can find me Waldorf, Maryland, every Wednesday at Beer For You. It is the internet age, so if you're still asking me for a motherfucking address, I hate you. I hate your soul, because you can Google it, all right? It's Beer For You. It is a little dive bar where me and my man D Sharp run an open mic out there, and it's a great workout room. I'm not going to lie to you and say that it's packed all the time. Sometimes it's packed, sometimes it's not, but it's a great spot. I'd like to say we're real supportive to let you come out and do your thing. As far as shows, I got one with KY Nelly coming up the 27th of May. I'll be up in Baltimore. Okay. I've got another couple that are in the works right now, but nothing's finalized, so I'll be out doing my thing. I'll probably pop into like Rudy's spot, something, but I'm out there working, man. It usually just depends on what's going on and where it's at.
Okay. And then where can they find you on social medias?
All right, if you want to have your feelings hurt, please follow me on Twitter and Instagram, fake Terrance G. I like that because everybody's like, I'm the real such and such, and then they get that little verified check. Well, I'm fake, and then I'll get a verified check someday, and then you'll be like, I don't know what the fuck to believe. So I just like to mess with people. Right, yeah, exactly.
Okay. So, okay, so that's Twitter, that's Instagram. Yeah. All right, any last words, any parting words?
Nah, man, just I appreciate you having me, man. This has been fun. People, stop being so damn sensitive, please. Like, whatever happened to sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. You know?
Have you been to Palestine lately?
Hey, look, man. They might be stoning people to death, but that's my whole point, right? It's not like they're like, hey, you queer, and then they're like, oh, that's the worst thing you're doing to me right now. You know? Just throw a rock instead and kill me that way. Don't call me a queer and accuse me of fucking cattle. Like, no, don't do it.
All right, man. It was good having you. Thanks,
Hell yeah.
This has been another episode of On the Grind with Justin Brown. This is Justin Brown saying,
Eat a Richard.
All right. Until next time, guys. Take care.